We're going to be taking a look at the Hungarian AMD-65 parts kit. This is the assembled rifle, and one of the well, I say this a lot, but it's one of my favorite AKs. Real short, real versatile, really interesting AK. So we're taking a look at its parts kit though. So this is, again, you've seen a couple of our videos. Rifles are no longer able to be imported under the Gun Control Act of 1968. They have to be chopped up. So they come across from Europe with the receiver, the part of the rifle that is registered as the firearm. This is actually a U.S.-made receiver for an AMD-65. Because this receiver is a firearm and it can't be installed, it can't be imported. They chop this receiver into parts. It's also a full auto receiver on the real rifles, so they have to chop it into parts, and then you get those parts because they're just pieces of metal. You can assemble them again into a rifle similar to this one, and it's a pretty dead-on accurate version of the AMD. Of course, it's semi-auto. It's not full auto because that's not possible anymore. From the Firearms Owners Protection Act. Now we'll take a look at some of the components here. We've got the stock. Next we're pulling out the bolt carrier and bolt. Next out is the receiver cover, the dust cover, and the recoil spring. A pin came out along with everything. We've got the front handguards, or the front unit of the gun, the front section of the gun, and you can see that it's a very short barrel on the AMD. This one has been removed from the front trunnion. It's got the rear sight block and the gas tube in place, and then the lower handguard. There's no upper handguard on this one, but there's a lower handguard with this pistol grip. Got just a few small parts now. Heavy duty bag. Small parts include the pistol grip, the little base plate cover thing for the bottom of the pistol grip, the front trunnion where the barrel would fit into, and then the trigger parts, which we can't use. And then the plate, well, this is a nut for the top of the handguard, and this plate is, I thought, the top of the handguard too. I'll have to double check on what that one is. So we have to we can't use these trigger parts, but we can use just about the rest of the parts here. You notice this one is missing its trigger guard, and that's kind of annoying. I didn't realize that until I took it apart here. It didn't fall out of the parts kit, so I'm guessing that this kit either was demilled with a torch, in which case they probably screwed up the trigger guard, or for whatever case the trigger guard's not here now. There's also no safety on this one, the safety lever, and those are pretty important. So I'll have to get one of those for it. Looks like I got most of the rest of the parts though. And again, with this receiver, this will be a little easier to show that the front trunnion is going to slide into place here. And the holes line up. I don't know if that's obvious on the video or not, but the holes in the front trunnion line up with the holes in the receiver. On the rear, we have to drill out those holes still, but you can see where this would fit in back here, and if the rivets weren't there, it would slide into place like it did on the front. The receiver for an AMD is noticeably different than a receiver for a different type of AK. Here's one for just a regular, typical AK, and the difference is that back here there's a notch cut out for the side folding stock on the AMD-65, where you'd have to cut that notch out on a regular AK receiver. Otherwise, they're fairly similar. This one is a US made one, and it's a fairly decent made, but it's not accurate. What I mean by not accurate is, let's take a look on this side where it's a little cleaner. And what we're looking at is the dimple and the spot welds. This rifle is made in Hungary, so it's made on the actual FEG factory where the AMD-65s were made. So it's not much, it's not really possible to get a more accurate AMD-65 here. And when we look, we've got 2, 1, real one that was 2, 2, and 2. Not a big difference, but to a collector, to someone who's trying to make an authentic replica, this isn't correct. And that's a very difficult thing to do, to change those welds. So the best builders pay attention to this kind of stuff, and they do their best to try to duplicate that type of process. But the big difference, the real difference that people are going to notice, is the dimple. And I don't know how well it's going to show up here. I'll try to zoom in on the dimples here. And the difference is that the real AMD dimple is sort of, I'm going to call it a swimming pool shape, where this US one is narrower and doesn't have as much radius. So while from 6 feet away, and probably most people aren't going to know or care, on this one it definitely makes a difference. It just looks wrong. So while it's a well-made receiver, it's not 100% perfect. Looking at the dimples there, they're very distinct. On the US made one, they're a little more subtle, a little more faded. At least they put them there. There are some US receivers where they don't even put the X and Y. Looking underneath, the actual receiver is a single hook, meaning it's got the one little slot here next that's coming out in front of the trigger, where on this US made version they made it a double hook, so there's 2 cutouts. Again, not a big difference to most people, but a collector is going to notice that. Otherwise, fairly decent receiver. If we take a look at the rivet that holds the receiver together here, right here. If we look at this rivet, it's huge on this US version, yet on the real one it's very subtle. So that's something, it's very subtle. So that's something that the collector, again, is going to need to duplicate. It's better to have an oversized rivet like this, though, that you can machine down to be the correct rivet. So to their credit, at least they erred in the side of overbuilding it when they built this one, and that allows you to create a more correct looking rivet out of it. Some of the other features of the AMD-65, the shorter barrel, as we mentioned. This is an actual AMD-65 barrel, and it's quite a bit shorter than the one that was built for US import. And the reason for that is we have to have a 16-inch barrel here, according to the NFA, the National Firearms Act of 1934. Obviously, I just did a lot of research on the firearms laws. So because it has to have the 16-inch barrel, they add this extension, and that's welded in. So basically this can't just be removed with a set of tools. This is permanently affixed to the barrel, which gives you a 16-inch overall legal length, which sort of does throw off the look of the AMD. Imagine if it had this shorter barrel, how much, it would really change the it would change the gun a little bit, because you wouldn't have so much stuff sticking out the end past the front sight block. That I just noticed too, that my parts kit here is missing the muzzle device, so it's missing a few parts. It has a folding wire stock, and it's different than like the Tantal and the Bulgarian kits that we've looked at. Its button is here, and they can really be a bear, and this one is definitely a bear. So I'm using both fingers, because it's so tough, to push up that button, which releases it, and then it'll fold to the side. Obviously this one is built, well, I shouldn't say obviously, this one is built on in the factory, an actual Hungarian factory, so its stock is 100% true. That's not something that necessarily happens on the US made versions. Sometimes the stocks get bent, sometimes the builders just don't know what they're doing as well, and you'll see that on the actual, when it's built and it's 100% legit, what we've got, I'm going to try to zoom into it, is a small little rubber nib that stops the receiver. Is that going to focus? There's this little nib here that is stopping the stock from hitting the side of the receiver. Keeps it silent, and it stops your receiver from getting a worn spot there from the stock hitting it. To get the stock working again, you basically push up on this button again, and that's a little tough with this one. I could go in and take some of the tension off this spring, and that would make the stock a little easier to deal with. So, but anyway, once it's worn in, or once the tension's set correctly, you would push up with your thumb, and again with your finger just sort of pull the wire out, lock it up into place. And a lot of people don't like the wire folders on AKs because they're can be a little bit difficult to get a cheek weld. But if you just assume you're not going to get a cheek weld and deal with it, they become real appealing in my opinion. They're small, they're very lightweight, they don't take up a lot of room when folded, and this AMD is definitely a police style rifle, something that is meant to be used indoors and slung over your shoulder or down to your side. And having a wire folder stock makes it very convenient to walk around with this one when it's short. Again, if you imagine the AMD with the short barrel and the stock folded, it's very close to the, it's sort of a big crink. It's not as short as a real crink, but it's definitely in there. So the AMD is a well-built one. Hungary makes some decent AKs. You can now get these imported from Hungary. I don't know how that happened, but count your blessings. This is a really nice AK. Thanks to the guys at Tucson Guns for letting us borrow this one to do this video. This is one I don't want to take back. I want to keep that one. It's a good one. So I just want to quickly put this one together like I did in the other video. I guess this one's interesting. Since the rear trunnion's missing, you can see real easily how the bolt and the barrel match up on this one. Kind of interesting. We'll have to do a video on the operation of an AK using some of these as examples. So we put the spring in there, we get ourselves lined up on the rear trunnion, and then lock our dust cover into place. And that gives us a pretty good idea of how long an actual AMD-65 would be. We'll talk about magazines for a moment. This one from Century is imported and then given a US magazine. As we mentioned in I think a prior video, you have to have a certain amount of US parts on an AK to abide by the 922R, and those are so the magazine is three. It's the faceplate, the body, and the follower are three separate parts. Your trigger group is three more parts, so now we're at 6 parts right there. And if they change the gas piston, which I'm not sure, then that's potentially a 7th part. So they're in good shape as far as being able to set this one up with the real handguard and the real wires folding stock, which is a total plus. This is a really neat setup, and having that stock on there is really neat. This is, I believe this is the correct pouch for them. They hold 4 steel magazines. The AMD with its forward pistol grip, a lot of people think you can't insert magazines very easily, but you can actually use it a little bit easier because you can use the pistol grip as an index. So with this short one, no problem. I bring my hand up and index off of that front handguard, and you can see they rock into place real easily. If I were to take a longer one, they lock into place as well. Now what I do to abide by 922R is I run a US follower and a US base plate, which basically look the same, just that they're made here in America and they're marked US. So that way you can still use foreign looking magazines and keep your US parts count up. So with this 30 round mag, again, it's very easy. I just sort of use that handguard as the index, and it does, you know, it's a tight fit, but it's not